I just want to start by picking up on one of the points that Jill just made in terms of national surveys. I'm not going to sort of sit here and defend them, but what I would say in terms of the National Student Survey is that it's a very good tool at sort of flagging the issues up. Yeah. So, for example, something like feedback. Everyone has known for 30 years that feedback and assessment are the two key issues affecting students. It was only actually when the National Student Survey said it in black and white that actually institutions really started to take that seriously and do sort of proper work in terms of tackling it. And the way in which it rose up the political agenda as a result of the NSS is actually quite a useful tool. But also, I suppose, in terms of flagging up issues that can then be further investigated at the institutional level. I suppose one of the key issues in terms of surveys as well is that students will want to be engaged in different ways. Over the last 40, 50 years, we've seen a massive expansion in terms of the numbers of people going into higher education. And so whilst sort of the people in this room have clearly sort of taken a decision to get actively involved in shaping the curriculum, that's not for every single student. Obviously, it's our role or responsibility to challenge that, because they'll get an awful lot more out of it. But for most students, actually just filling in a survey and giving in their views is part of the way in which they want to be engaged in that. And I suppose one of the things, I suppose, in terms of challenging that from the NUS perspective, we just had funding from HEFCE to do a joint project with the Higher Education Academy, and we're looking at how students can be better engaged in shaping their teaching and learning experience. So one of that is looking at the ways in which they feed back as part of their course, so NSS, course evaluation surveys. The second strand is very much looking at representation, so looking at those students that have taken the decision to get involved as course reps, faculty reps, and so on. But the third strand is very much some of the things we've been talking about this morning, and some of the things that you both referred to already in terms of engaging students in shaping their curriculum to a much greater extent. I suppose coming out of the survey, NUS does an annual survey, sort of a student experience survey. And one of the things that sort of struck me most about that survey last year was that in response to the question, do you want to be engaged in shaping the content, the curriculum development of your course, only 23% felt they currently were involved in that, compared to 57% that wanted to be more involved. So clearly there is that untapped well of wanting to, enthusiasm for getting involved more in this. Clearly there's still another, 43% who we have more work to do in terms of encouraging that. But that comes very much back to sort of this co-production model. If no one's mentioned it yet, so I'm going to have to mention it. In terms of sort of the gym model of higher education, you pay your subscription to go to the gym. At the end of 3 years, you're not fit unless you've actually gone in and exercised. Very much with higher education, you can pay your fees, but unless you actually go in, contribute, fully engage in your course, then you're not actually going to get anything out of it. So that's sort of one of the key challenges in terms of the consumerist model. And so I suppose in terms of that, there's a well in terms of students wanting to get engaged, and clearly sort of, there are reasons for that. I suppose just finally, one interesting thing to think about is the way in which Web 2.0 will have an impact in terms of the changing perceptions of those young people coming into higher education. For people who have grown up getting used to, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitter, whether it's writing blogs, feeling they've had much more control about what they're doing, about how they're engaging, when they come into higher education and are sitting in a room of 200 people being talked at, that will disengage them almost immediately. So institutions will need to think about how they can engage, particularly looking at technology, but how they can engage students that are going to come to expect much more from how it's delivered.
So the question was about ways in which students can be collaborators, producers, and what are the potential implications for staff, students and other stakeholders of this. As we've heard, there are many ways. I guess I can speak about our experience at the Invention Centre, where we've developed our student as producer sort of slogan. Originally that was to challenge the divide between research and teaching and demonstrate, as we've already seen this morning, that undergraduates can be researchers and hopefully learn loads that way, and we've also shown that through our Journal of Undergraduate Research, where students from all around the world now are publishing their research in our journal. we've got colleagues at Warwick in theatre studies and English, for example, that have adopted the student as producer concept in a sort of creative sense, that their students can be productive practitioners in sort of creative arts and so on. And more recently, we've engaged undergraduates as pedagogic researchers to help drive curriculum transformation. We've got a project going on between Warwick and King's College London, where and those student researchers are critically engaging with the concepts that the university's got about creating more research-informed students, more internationalised students, more interdisciplinary students, and looking critically at what's said about that, and thinking about informing ways in which those can be developed. And there's lots of other ways that I think students can be productive. The implications, well, Kath Lambert and other people in the Reinvention Centre have argued that these initiatives start to confront the hierarchical binaries between research and teaching, and also between staff and students. So I guess what we've all been arguing here today is that the initiatives in student engagement will make students engage more profoundly with their university experience, and that hopefully they'll feel that, other students will feel that, wider society, I've argued, will feel that as well. University staff may well feel a real challenge to their authority here. If my students can do all these things, they can be researchers, they can design their own curriculum, well, what am I for? And I think that's a really important thing to take into consideration and think about staff's motivations and how they are rewarded as well. I mean, our research does show that academics who can move beyond that reaction and collaborate with students in a meaningful sense, find their own practice, their own teaching, their own research invigorated as a result. But again, just quoting, this is David Orr this time, he's pointed out that in the modern curriculum we've fragmented the world into bits and pieces called disciplines and subdisciplines, and some of the big issues of our time have to do in one way or another with our failure to see things in their entirety, and that failure occurs when minds are taught to think in boxes and are not taught to transcend them. And I've got this awful image of staff and students beavering away in these little boxes, no one learning very much, no one having an experience that's terribly fulfilling or even enjoyable. And I've found this morning extremely enjoyable, and the interaction that's gone on very enjoyable, and people laughing a bit and having a nice time, as well as exploring some really profound issues. It'd be nice to get to that place.